Okay, fantastic. Looks like we are live and good to go here. So this is the Financial Instruments panel, and I would like to welcome Robert Mandel from Zuber Lawler, one of our sponsors for the event. Robert, feel free to take it away here.
Thank you, Patrick. Well, I'm delighted to be here today, and I'd like to introduce our two panelists. First, we have Peter Goldstein from Exchange Listing, and we also are lucky enough to have Cody Shandraw from Ambria Capital. So welcome, guys. Great to see you in person.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, so you know what I think that we'd like to do first is just have Peter, if you don't mind, introducing yourself to our audience and telling us a little bit about your background and Exchange Listing.
Great. Thanks, Robert. Hi, everybody. Great to be here. So I'll keep it kind of short and sweet. You know, I've had the benefit of being an entrepreneur now for over 35 years, I guess, which starts to show my age. But I launched, you know, my first business as a startup almost 35 years ago and had my first exit at the age of 30. And since then, I guess you'd consider me a serial entrepreneur. I split my time really between building companies. I've been both an operator and then as well participating in the U.S. capital markets and on Wall Street. So I've served as a founder, you know, executive officer, director, and advisor to both public and private companies. The commonality is that they're typically emerging growth companies. And so having part of my career being where I started and sold the boutique investment bank, which is still active on Wall Street, I've participated in the capital market industry with structuring, you know, negotiating and implementing a broad range of transactions, including M&A, public and private offerings, you know, IPOs, private equity investments, you know, joint ventures and strategic alliances. So Exchange Listing is really a modern merchant bank, and we created it to give entrepreneurs direct access to strategic planning and implementation of raising capital and listing on a senior exchange such as the NASDAQ, the NYSE, or the NEO. And after many years of experience, we believe that if you're going to be public, you're best off listing on a senior exchange where you have access to capital. I'll leave it short there, and you know we can always dive deeper.
Thank you, Peter. Cody, would you tell us a little bit about yourself and your company?
Yeah, so I'm the Director of Business Development for Ambria Capital, our San Juan, Puerto Rico-based asset manager. Currently, I manage our due diligence and market assessment projects, including the building and maintaining of all of our relationships with clients and partner companies. I mean, guys, we invest in a very wide range of companies, mostly emerging, private and public. Mainly, we've been focusing over the last 2 years, especially in the healthcare and consumer and tech space. So, guys, we're really structured as a hedge fund, but we operate as a family office. Haven't raised a single dollar. It's all partner money. I've been very lucky to have made 30 investments in the psychedelic space over the last 2.5 years. Very wide ranging, everything from clinics to companies developing new chemical entities and formulations. Very similar to Peter.
And now we've lost Cody. Cody, we lost you for the last 20 seconds. About 20 seconds now.
You guys hear me okay?
Now I can.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'll keep it quick. I guess one of the things that really separates us is, you know, we have a comprehensive analytical approach. So one of the things that we really specialize in is leveraging our network of contacts and, you know, connecting, obviously, leaders in the industry with some of our other market opportunities and the companies that we're invested in.
Cody, it might just be you and me for a little bit. We'll call it a fireside chat.
That's no problem.
So why psychedelics? I mean, obviously that, you know, everybody's talking about the psychedelics industry. Is it, you know, from a lawyer's perspective, you know, I say, well, look, you know, at least when you're talking about Schedule I psychedelics, nothing is really legal in the U.S. So is all of this exuberance irrational or rational at this point? And what do you find attractive about it?
So I guess personally, the interest level comes from some of the family dynamics that have been presented in the past. I've seen several family members go through, you know, rehab and depression and, it seems like there haven't been a lot of solid options for, I don't want to say a cure because I don't think that's the right word, but at least helping to mitigate some of, the issues that come from those two things. From a fund level, listen, there's several of us inside that have a very similar story to myself with family members and friends. And listen, I think that, we're pioneering possibly a new way forward to the mental health crisis that we're facing.
Right.
I mean, I think some of the, latest data shows 1 out of every 2 people now has some form of mental illness. And I can only imagine that's being amplified by being locked in the house over the last 12 months. So I think that there's a giant need. As far as the hype,
yeah,
hype obviously is important for any new blossoming and emerging industry, but at the same time, I definitely think needs to be preceded, with tremendous amounts of caution. I think some of these things are very powerful substances that have a place in, a controlled medical setting in most instances.
So, I was just asking Cody about, the hype regarding the psychedelics industry and whether that's rational or irrational exuberance at this early stage. Do you have any thoughts about that?
Well, if you look at the amount of capital going in and the tranches of capital that have come in, and the fact that capital is increasing both in the value and the unit prices, that these offerings are oversubscribed, I think there's a lot of belief that this is going to be a very well capitalized emerging sector where the breadth and the momentum is sustainable. Yeah,
and so what trends, Peter, are you seeing in the with regard to financing in psychedelics right now?
I think it's very clear this is a capital intensive industry, right? So if you kind of follow the money, the trends and the financing where each one has been built on the leading companies we're talking about now are in the public sector, in the capital markets. There's been over, $500 million raised in the last 6 months that I'm tracking. And I would say about 350 million of that was raised by public companies. So there clearly is a trend for money following liquidity and the ability for investors to see a pathway to getting an ROI.
And before I get back to Cody, is there any financial data you can share on recent financings other than the 500 million that's been raised in the 6 months?
I mean, there are a number of specific companies that think, really kind of led the pathway to opening up the public sector. I mean, Compass, the IPO for Compass was probably one of the biggest, where, they came in with a, $120 million offering that was upsized to, about 150 million. And then the company's stock, quickly doubled in early trading. There are several, the pattern that I'm seeing there is that there are rounds of private placements leading into an IPO. So you'll have 2 to 3 rounds. MindMed would be a good example where they, in 2.5 months, they raised over $150 million. Each financing increased by, total was, I think, about 220%, and the price increased over 300%. So it's just an example of some of the breadth and the scope and the trends that we're seeing with specific companies that have gone from private placement into IPO.
Great. And Cody, so what makes a psychedelics company attractive? What do you look for when you're thinking about investing in these types of businesses?
I mean, it's obviously depending on what stage the company's at, right? Just like anything else. In no particular order, obviously the intellectual property portfolio is extremely important. Management team knowledge on the drug development process. I think a lot of some of the smaller companies that are now starting to come out of the weeds there, I'm not sure a lot of the guys are really familiar with the, like Peter was talking about, not only the cash need that is needed for a lot of these, but also the amount of time that has to go into there. Knowledge of capital markets, how experienced is the team? Have they taken other companies public? Have they had successful exits? And then I guess really right now, I think it's going to be one of the later panels on here is really the team's ethics. I mean, you're starting to see a very wide-ranging discussion take place over, the environment of intellectual property. It's been kind of interesting to see a lot of it take place in the public realm. And, to touch base, I guess, on some of the recent financings, I mean, our first investment in the space was in 2019. I mean, it's been incredible to see. Small pharmas, I think, raised $58 or $6 million for their RTO. Field Trip, obviously moving up in levels with a healthcare fund like Bloom Burton and raising another $96 million. I mean, it's, MindMed sitting with $200 million on their books. It's been incredible to see the injections of cash come across. And, just also some of the partnerships, Cybin, seeing them partner with Catalent, $3 billion in sales. It's, like Peter said, I mean, just follow the trail of money. You can kind of start to see where this is headed here over the next 24, 36 months.
Yeah, so a lot of money coming in. Peter, what are the companies using that money for right now?
Well, clearly you've got, the ability to have capital to first and foremost build out the core business, whichever that sector may be, and inside of, the particular and unique aspects of the business model. But I guess, some of the broad brush are on the top categories, certainly drug R&D. It's a critical component of the industry, requires time and intensive capital and unique partnerships. Separate from that, clearly there's a play here in the mental health clinics. It's a sector that we're most interested in ourselves. And then if you look at some of the digital and the technology aspects, digital platforms and technology that are going to be able to advance, mental health care. That's really, when you have an industry this early, this kind of nascent stage, I think you can expect a consolidation, just like we've seen, if you want to parallel the cannabis sector, where, the well-financed companies are using that capital to acquire through M&A, earlier stage or other strategic companies that would fit inside of, their ability to grow and to scale more rapidly. So M&A, I think, will continue to be an area where we'll see, the use of capital, as well as the development of the core business and the intellectual properties.
And then, Cody, what kind of diligence do you do with regard to the science? In other words, obviously, a lot of this R&D has to do with the development of molecules, the patenting of molecules, these sorts of very, scientific-oriented subjects. What does somebody in your field do in order to validate the information that you're getting from these companies and make sure that, it's legit?
The most important thing is having a very robust network of not only partnerships with universities, but also third-party drug development companies that aren't currently, in the space, but are evaluating the future. So, being able to see, again, it gets back to the team members that have, success with past. I mean, listen, the FDA approval process is, let's be conservative, anywhere from 5 to 10 years. Realistically, probably closer to 10 to 15, but obviously a lot of these things had decades of research done in the late 40s, 50s, 60s, even a little bit of the early 70s. So luckily, the existing, I guess, big four, hopefully those will be fast-tracked. But on the new chemical entities, I mean, listen, it's really hard to do due diligence on a lot of these things. A lot of these things are being, discovered every single day. I mean, as far as putting the faith again inside of the management team, having experience, it's really at this point one of the main driving factors.